Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, one and all. Welcome to another edition of The Smoking Barrel. I'm Rustin Edwards, based in crisp, cool Geneva, with my illustrious co-host Matt Stanley in Dubai.
Greetings. 30th of
Greetings,
March. Um,
salutations. Can't believe the end of Q1 already, and my God, what a quarter it has been.
March sucks balls, mate. It really does. March can do one and never return. Um, End of March. Yeah, I can't believe it. End of the quarter. It's actually as well. It's about 24 degrees today, which is highly un-Dubai-like for this time of the year. But it is what it is. How are things here? It was a noisy night, put it that way. Heard a lot of interceptions overnight. I would say probably the loudest for since I came back last Monday. There were, I think, 20 missiles intercepted yesterday. Um, and that's the highest we've seen since the end of February when all this started. So retaliatory. Look, it just I don't know what to say about that. Are people getting on with it now? I'm not sure it's one of those things you can get on with, but um, the anxiety when you get a missile alert and the government alert on your phone isn't as profound as it was when we first had them. So take that with value wherever we want to take it. But it's I would say though, I went out on Saturday and the pub was busy, very busy. So when in doubt, go to the pub.
Well, carry on, right? Speaking of carrying on, we got crude oil 115.19 here in the front.
Yeah,
Gas oil, $1,442 a ton, which is about $190 a barrel.
that's extraordinary.
And
Jet fuel was trading $225 a barrel in Singapore on Friday.
so we still have very strong markets. A lot of it's still centered around the lack of product flow out of the Middle East, a lot of lack of crude out of the Middle East, keeping
Yeah.
everything's in an elevated state.
Yeah, look, what we want to do is today is talk about there's a couple of things. Obviously, we'll talk about what's happening. Who gives a shit about the Fed anymore? Tariffs. Who cares about that? Sanctions. What are they? Doesn't matter. The things that we used to dominate what me and you used to discuss are literally fish and chip paper now. There's a couple of things I want to talk about. So, what happens in a time of crisis like this is that everyone then suddenly understands or you kind of open up your mind to like things you were complacent about before going to the petrol station in Europe and suddenly there's not enough of the thing that you've always complacently bought, even though when Russia invaded Ukraine over 4 years ago now, Europe faced the same issue. But there's a couple of things I just want to talk about first. Just let me land and we can talk about it. One is what my colleague Homayun wrote. Now, the stark reality of where we actually are in markets right now is the cumulative oil losses we're seeing because the Middle East Gulf is essentially shut. Let me just pull up the map just 1 second so you can see. Uh, right, let's go into the Babylon. I mean, look how congested all this is, and I'm not even properly. Can you see this all right? It's a bit jumpy. It's a bit slow, the old internet. Um, Again, Corfacan, Fujairah. Here is where the vast majority of ships are parked. Middle East Gulf. Still nothing going through here. We are in the fourth week of this now. So what is actually locked in here that can't go this way? And which boats are here that can't go that way, right? This is Bab el-Mandeb Strait, Larak Island, Mussadam here. This is, Russ has explained it brilliantly on a previous chat. Let me just explain what is actually locked in. Cumulative losses, 213 million barrels of losses that haven't moved, that are locked in essentially, of oil that can't flow as it always has. If disruptions carry on as they are, that will reach 570 million barrels by the end of April. Production shut-ins continue to deepen, now estimated at 11.5 million barrels a day. We have seen the largest oil supply disruption in history, and these are the people who are currently feeling the most. Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi, UAE, anyone within that Middle East Gulf. These are the numbers. Okay, I don't want to put too much around what all that means, but 213 million barrels could reach 570 by April, 11 and a half of production. Okay, that's where we are. Now, over the weekend, what did we see? Um, we saw the Houthis down in the Bab el Mandeb Strait. Let me pull that back up. Sorry, I should have stayed on the map. This is something that you and I have spoken about at length. This here is Yemen. This is where the Houthis are based. These are ships that are going through. Now, what have we seen? Usually we see a boat that will say, I don't know what that means, Invad, IOC, are buying a cargo from Yanbu of Arab Light on a Suezmax. Usually we see something like the Russian crew on board, Singapore for orders, Suez for orders, all Chinese crew. That has long been the case we've seen since the Houthis started firing up till January 2025, really. But look, that's a concern because all the oil at the moment that the Saudi are producing is coming out of Yanbu from the East-West pipeline, and it's going this way. Will they have to go further around? My colleague Muyu mentions this. So Asia losing prompt barrels, bypassing Bab el-Mandeb extends Middle East to East Asia voyages to 50-day, more than double current transit times. 1.9 million barrels a day of Russian crude continues via the Red Sea, so that's in danger. And we saw this morning that the production from on the East-West pipeline has hit the highest it can, which is 7 million barrels a day. So a good news story. That's a lot of information I've just given you there in 7 minutes. But Edwards, Strait of Hormuz closed off. Bab el-Mandeb Strait, I think owners are going to go around the Cape now. What does all that mean? Condense all that. What does that mean for oil markets?
Well, again, it means longer lead times of movement to get oil from the Middle East to Asia. I mean, so 50 days, yeah, because what happens now, ships have to go either to the Transmed pipeline at Ain Soukna, which is in Egypt on the south side of the Straits of the Suez Canal, or
Yeah,
transit through the Suez Canal, fully loaded with crude oil, and truck their way around the full continent of Africa.
down by
Going through
Cape of Good
the
Hope.
yeah, around the Cape of Good Hope. So, it just adds more lead time to the length of supply and actually bolsters freight rates more than anything else because tanker rates will have to accommodate for a longer transit time. Now, the Houthis have threatened that they will start attacking shipping. They haven't done it yet. They only fired a couple of missiles towards Israel. They haven't done anything
Yeah,
else other than that at the moment. But my thought would be at that point, if the Houthis decided they wanted to get involved and start striking ships, does that reignite the war that was already there between Saudi Arabia and the Houthis in earnest? Because they're going to directly impact the lifeline of Saudi Arabia.
yeah. I mean, I put on my commentary this morning that perhaps the Houthis getting involved. I think you and I touched on it last week. We were quite surprised that they hadn't. So I think it was kind of sadly inevitable that we were going to get to this point where the Bab el-Mandeb Strait would come under threat. Um, and I think the market. What does the shipping community do or did? I mean, were they was the sort of Cape of Good Hope sort of baked into the cake already, or were some people slowly coming back to go through the Red Sea
Well,
again?
as we can see by the map, ships were starting to transit back through the Red Sea again. Normal shipping, routes were being rediverted back through their historic routes and not transiting around the Cape of Africa. So it is a case that okay, they'll have to now if the Houthis start shooting again,
Yeah,
you'll start having kinetic action in the Red Sea because the U.S. does have military assets sitting in the Red Sea. I believe so do some of the other European countries that were there doing the anti-ship attacks. And it may just inflame this even further because you will get European involvement, I would think. Where, I think the European Union military will have, and not, the European nations will have a better use of their naval assets in defending the Straits of Bab el-Mandeb because that can be considered a carve out from the overall Middle East region.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, look, what's happening right now. The Strait of Hormuz being choked off 4 weeks. All that barrel, all that oil I just showed you has been locked in. What amazes me is how people are like, especially within the UAE, and I totally get it. People are like, well, if you look at say foot traffic in the malls or or the amount of flights that are coming in and out and people not connecting in Dubai, there is a profound effect on economic activity. People are talking about the housing market hasn't really felt it yet. It's only a month, right? It's only a month, and 2 of those weeks we had spring break, so people were away anyway, so that's a seasonal thing. Now we're starting to feel the end user is starting to feel the issue. And I said to you before we came on, I was on Sky News Australia yesterday because Australia are in this unique position where they're a big supplier to the global minerals market, energy markets, big gas supplier, but still rely heavily on, I think 80% of Australia's diesel is imported. They've
Well,
only got two working refineries.
they also shut down some of the refining capacity as well.
Yeah, they
So
had eight,
Australia,
10 years. Yeah,
yeah, so they did reduce their own refining capacity, relying mainly on import markets because at the time the economic choice was, well, the import market is far cheaper than us running a refinery with Australian labor costs. Therefore, let's shut down these refineries. We don't need them. We can just bring in the extra barrels.
yeah.
Uh,
But I mean, the mining industry relies heavily on that diesel,
Oh,
right?
sure it does. And I think most of their consumers rely heavily on diesel. I think, like a lot of European nations, they have a primarily diesel-driven consumer base
Yeah.
outside of industrial base. I am considering miners being an industrial base. So, and a lot of their imports were coming from countries that aren't exporting product, i.e., China, Asia, where a lot of the countries are holding off on exporting any goods right now because they don't want to be caught short in their own home countries.
Yeah. I mean, look,
So
this is Australia's monthly imports of gas oil and diesel. I sort of group these together to give you we just did diesel, that would be a different sulfur content than how we group gas oil. But look at this. This is an interesting one. Barrels coming out for the first time ever in Australia's history. They're importing three cargoes from the US. Now, if we look at those, this one here, this has come out of the refinery in the US Gulf Coast and has gone via the via the Panama Canal. Same as this one here. That's highly unusual. And this is the reason I'm saying that isn't it's not panic buying, is it? But people are like, right, shit. Okay, where is the vast majority of my diesel coming from? South Korea. They're the biggest supplier. So if you're looking at it, look at what happened in March. 1.9 million tons, of which, let's say, Malaysia, Singapore, Taiwan make up over 50% easily, right? Um, and then South Korea suddenly go, well, we're not going to export as much anymore. China are going to say, we're not going to export as much anymore. And you can see that here, April, which cargoes will be on the way now, China are exporting nothing to Australia because people have become insular, don't they? So the way to look at this kind of data, and this is what people need to kind of, what we want to try and show as Kepler and as a smoking barrel, like, comment, subscribe, is the market will always find a way to find oil. So where China supplied 230,000 tons, didn't supply anything in February, 230,000 tons in March. In April, that's coming up from 2 days' time, a lot of that's been replaced by the US. So traders are very quick to adapt, aren't they? They go, it's almost not a balance sheet trade, is it? It's I need oil and I need to get it now.
well, it probably has to deal with the fact, okay, the United States is one of the main exporters of crude and products to the world.
Yeah,
And so what you can see happening, especially with the relaxation on some of the sanctions talk around Russian gas oil and Russian crude oil, is you're probably seeing a rebalancing that's going on that we've always talked about, where flows are moving. Instead of that diesel going, say, to South America, yeah, it's going to go to Australia, and South America is going to backfill with Russian gas oil.
yeah,
And so you're just going to see a whole dynamic shift as products reroute to locations where the receiving location will happily take it,
yeah.
and that where that product would normally go would get backfilled from another country.
Well, here's the thing, and I think a lot of people are not talking about this. I think that there is this kind of like, I don't want to say this ignorance, but I think certain people in the market are going, well, I think sanctions will be eased on Russia, right? So suddenly they'll be able to export gas oil to places they weren't able to before. But let's not forget, Ukraine are attacking Ust-Luga, Primorsk, the Black Sea. Russia is I think, what did you say? Exports are down 40% because of
Yeah,
Ukrainian drone
they hit
strikes.
40% of their export capacity because of Ust-Luga and Primorsk attacks. And these were massive attacks over the last 4 days.
Yeah, I saw it. I just see
Tons
one
of
now.
drones hitting infrastructure, tanks, pipelines, docks, you name it, the Ukrainians hit it. And that's kind of the subcontext of what's going on outside of Middle East. And I think it's being a bit ignored at the moment because it's not the Middle East, it's Russia, Ukraine. But you take that impact to Russian exports on top of the impact of exports out of the Middle East, and yeah, you do have a significant reduction of material in the marketplace. Now, the idea of Russian sanctions being released, well, there are countries that were buying Russian products regardless of sanctions, non-sanctions, whatever. And I think those countries continue to do so, will continue to do so. They'll just back out other products to bring in more of the Russian because they can, and it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, one of my mates, he's obviously like, Matt, what's going on with markets and all this kind of stuff. And I said, well, what I've seen this morning is that Ust-Luga and Primorsk have been hit, and his response was, "Oh yeah, I forgot about that war." And I think a lot of people have, and it's not funny because I don't want anyone to get hurt or peril, and I'm laughing at myself. I know you are as well, but it's amazing how quick the focus shifts. That is still very much happening. I would argue if there was no conflict in the Middle East right now, the market would still be bid because of the Ukrainian strikes on Russian energy infrastructure. It is an important point. I think a lot of people are, maybe that's why we're up this morning, because actually the narrative that's coming out of Trump and Iran is that, and we've heard it, a lot. We've achieved our objectives. We're near the end. And now talks are going on in Pakistan about potential diplomatic resolution. Maybe the market hasn't sold off on that. The market doesn't believe it, I don't think, which
Well,
is a
no,
sad
actually,
state of affairs.
I think our current price at 115 is a result of the Ukrainian strikes on Russia. Because if you look at where we were on Friday,
Yeah.
when the first reports of the Ukrainian hits started coming into the news wires, the market moved up dramatically on Friday. And we're kind of holding in this area because that is a significant hit to extra crude on the marketplace, as well as extra gas oil and extra naphtha. And you look at those three products reacted massively to that headline.
Yeah,
Um,
this is why I dismiss those rumors about the US government keeping a cap on oil prices, because it's not just the Middle East. I know a lot of oil comes out of the Middle East, but not if all oil comes out of the Middle East. There are still other factors going on. There are still hurricanes that might happen coming up to hurricane season. Remember, that was what we used to talk about when demand might come off, when it's maintenance season. There are so many different dynamics that come into oil trading and I agree. I think the Russian-Ukraine the attacks there are just compounding supply issues, and I agree. I think that's adding weight behind why the market is bid this morning. We're only up $2.87 though, 115.40, a number we've traded around more or less all day so far.
well,
Um,
and everybody seems to forget that back in 2010, for about 8 years, we traded around this range. Now, it was a low interest rate environment, but for 10 years, we basically bounced around between 105 and 115, 120.
that's a good point. So let's go back to
And
that, Brent. Let me compare.
and the world can absorb energy costs as long as it's something that is static and stable, and markets react accordingly. Now, granted, we're in a different economic environment than we were back then because you didn't have the Chinese bid on all minerals coming into China that existed back in that time frame when China's economy was growing at 6-8% a year. We're now in a more stable economic environment with limited economic growth showing up, and this will be a drag on economic growth. But I think the world has learned a lot, and you're already starting to see market demand respond to the high price environment.
Yeah, let me just put. I'm
Because,
just. I'm just
as
trying
the
to.
old saying goes, what's secure for high prices? High prices.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. I'm just
and you
trying to.
already got people talking about instituting work from home again, for limited times, or for part of your work week to reduce energy consumption. You've already got people canceling business trips because, again, save the money, don't spend the money on the airline ticket that's now potentially gone up a little bit more than what it was before with the high fuel cost.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
let's just one sec. Let's go back to let's go back to the 30th of March 2014. Brent was at $107.80, right?
Set
Let's
the
go back
Wayback
to it.
Machine, Sherman.
Pardon?
Set the Wayback Machine, Sherman.
Yeah, and then let's go back to where gas oil was trading. This is the thing, right? Gas oil was trading at $894 a ton. So gas oil was trading at $120 a barrel. Now, people don't put Brent in their car, they put gas oil in their car or whatever you're going to run off. That's the issue, isn't it? Is that when you compare where Brent was then, when it was trading around these numbers, and where products were, it's done this, isn't it? Right?
Well, it's the consumer fuels is where the problems are because
Yeah.
that is what impacts everybody. You, me, anybody else. Well, not so much me, but anybody else who has an internal combustion engine. The high price of gasoline, high price of diesel, it's going to impact your overall cost of living and cost structure. You're going to have to start making
Yes.
choices. And
Well,
this is a concern that I think a lot of governments are having now. The EU. I mean, they're talking about instituting price caps, instituting profit um, taxes
yeah.
for excessive profits for the oil industry.
Yeah.
Um, you've got countries that are instituting rationing in some cases, or talking about it anyway. But you
Yeah.
do have this reaction that's coming from the governments to start trying to control the price impacts on the population.
Yep. Look, I just want to talk about this because this is along those lines for sure. Absolutely. The market and the world care about one thing, and that's where they're going on their summer holiday. Right? That's the kind of like, okay, it doesn't matter because I've got a holiday booked. And everyone's like, oh my God, my holiday's going to get cancelled, and that's what dominates the lunchtime table, really. And it's because of this shortage of product that's coming out of the Middle East. Again, we just touched this in Australia, them buying product from the US because they're so that diesel can flow. Granted, there's not as much around, so there will be an element of a shortage, but perhaps that's because the domestic refineries might be running harder, whatever it might mean. So here we are, UK imports of jet and kerosene. It's this is the highest it's been since August, right? Oil is flowing, jet fuel is flowing. There is not a shortage of jet in the UK, right? Places can run. Let's also not forget that air travel demand is down because the hubs are down. So I personally, and I don't know if I'm being arrogant here or dismissive, I don't see a jet crisis or a jet fuel shortage in the UK. Do I see one in Europe? Let's have a look at what Europe's going to look like. I'd imagine the vast majority of jet fuel and kerosene that Europe are. Here we go. Let's bring this up as well so you can see because this is what the data is what matters here. It's not about opinion, fear, panic. It's about actually oil, jet fuel. Okay, here we go. European monthly imports jet and kerosene by origin country. So there's nothing coming out of the UAE. We've seen one cargo that was probably on its way before. Saudi, Yanbu, Netherlands, Kuwait will obviously suffer because there's nothing going to come out there. India will increase, and I'd imagine you'll see there's nothing coming out of the USA. That's interesting.
Well, the question about it's probably the USA is probably in the others category.
Yes, it is.
Um, but the one thing about the Indian oil, right, is okay, well, how much of is the EU going to drop their you can't bring in Russian oil that's processed from Russian crude? Are they going to drop that?
Well, you would have kind of hoped that that would have been some emergency legislation that the European Union would have put through already.
Or do they just not renew the 18th round of sanctions because those sanctions have to be renewed every 6 months according to the EU law? And so if you come up to that renewal period, if they don't renew it, then it goes away.
Do you think that there will be someone who'll go, do you know what, sod it? I can
I,
make so much money selling jet fuel into Europe right now. I'm going to buy a cargo of jet that may have been refined using Russian crude and try and get away with it.
I don't want to go down that path of speculating on people doctoring documents to make things look different than what they really are.
Would never
However,
happen.
what I can see happening that if prices move up to a certain point and hold up at a certain point, there'll be a lot of pressure on politicians to do something, especially when you start thinking about the farming industry in the European Union, because their inlaid cost of diesel is going to go up just like everything else. They've got to run their tractors.
Yep.
And even with the institution of higher biodiesel mixes, you still don't have enough to meet their demand. So either A, you have to do something to bring in more diesel or allow more diesel to come in. And that might be the result of taking on Russian processed gas oil from Russian crude.
Okay, what about I read a story last week that Greece have put in place this emergency fund, subsidy fund, because of the price of fertilizer. Right, we cover oil across the barrel, but obviously the things that there's more than that that comes out. There's a lot of aluminium comes out of the Middle East Gulf, not what do you call it?
Aluminum.
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 Stupid.
Yeah, we pronounce it correctly. I don't know what you English people are
You
doing.
can't say that on volatile. You're I can't even
Volatile.
say it. That's how. What is it?
Volatile.
Knobs. Right. Anyway, sorry, but there's
All
other
right. Is
stuff
it
that
the
comes
color
out.
or couleur?
It was just shut up. There's ferts that come out. There's petcoke that comes out. There's urea, like you said before.
Well,
What?
but the urea is the fertilizer mix, and that's the biggest problem I think the world is going to face is that the amount of fertilizer that's exported out of the Persian Gulf is not being exported to the world, and the world needs fertilizer.
Okay.
Uh,
So if I look at I mean, I've never done this. I've never looked at fertilizer imports into Europe. So okay. I mean, it doesn't. It's not
so
very.
one of the biggest importers of fertilizer into Europe comes from Russia
Yeah. So
because
that flow's allowed.
yes.
Okay. So okay. Fine. So what's to stop the current policy that's in place for fertilizer being transferred to energy?
I think
What's
it's going to be a matter of price and economic impact. Politicians react to their constituents complaining very loudly that I can't, take my kid to soccer anymore because, or football, sorry, to football practice anymore because, I can't afford to fill up my car. I mean, that's going to be you're going to have those types of reactions, or you're going to have people saying, I can't go to work anymore because I can't drive, or I can't buy food because I had to put gas in my car. When you start having those types of things pop out into the political mainstream, that's going to change the politics and
yeah.
change the reaction of politicians.
Yeah, and this is where it comes about government policy because then you're talking about subsidies, then you're talking about pressure on the central bank, then you're talking about interest rates.
Yep.
So it compounds, doesn't it? It's all of it compounds to a total change in fiscal policy by most of the world's central banks, the country
That's
central.
what will eventually have to happen, and we're already going to have to see that happen because everything that's going on right now, if everything remains status quo, inflation is going to be massive. And give it another 4 to 5 weeks, and we'll start seeing those inflation numbers start to accelerate to the upward position, upward trajectory. And
Q2 is gonna be challenging, isn't it?
well, Q2 is going to be very challenging. You're going to see probably negative GDP growth, and you're going to see high inflation environments. You're going to see interest rates have to start going up. We could see interest rates doubling rather easily in Q2.
Okay.
Um, and it's a nature of the beast right now, unfortunately, because this is where the cost of energy starts percolating through the economics of everything. I mean, we're already seeing it on surcharges for shipping. So, and those surcharges for shipping start pricing in against all goods being transited, and they'll be coming into delivered goods within the next 3 to 4 weeks. Air freight and airlines are already starting to talk about fuel surcharges on all tickets to cover the cost of jet fuel.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that for sure. But what are you talking about here? Just before we wrap up, what Donald Trump has done with, over the course of the last couple of years is get himself involved in everything, all policies, interest rates, who the next Treasury Secretary will be, who's going to the next Fed chairman, who the energy, what's going to happen to oil prices, drill, baby, drill. All of this, when you're talking about high energy prices, drill, baby, drill, the upstream producers will do well. The downstream, the end user's going to suffer. That's not good for interest rates. it's all a bit of a mess, isn't it?
It's a bit of a mess, but if you're in the United States, it's probably a great position to be in because you're the number one exporter of petroleum to the world and energy.
Yeah, but if you're a farmer in Oklahoma who's now going to have to pay a lot more for their fertilizer and their diesel to get around their massive ranch, that's not good.
Well, their fertilizer, though, is produced locally. The
Okay.
diesel's produced locally.
So you're
And
saying you're saying
the,
that this is if you're
the
in
price rise in
domestic,
the US is going to be high, but it's not going to be as high as an importing country like Australia.
so
Because the one thing the
comparatively,
US, say again,
comparatively, you're in a
comparative,
better position.
they're in a better position because they have local production and they're an exporter of energy.
Okay.
Um,
Well, as long as they're all right.
well, doesn't mean that it's right for the world. It just, is this something that, okay, why is the U.S. currency strengthening? Because everybody sees that the U.S. will be the net beneficiary of all this,
Yeah. Let's just before we go, I just want to see one thing.
rightfully or wrongfully.
No, exactly. I just want to see one thing. What are we seeing and the number of ships that are crossing the Strait of Hormuz?
Because there's a lot of chatter about ships being allowed as part of goodwill gestures by the Iranians,
Yeah.
um, which my thought would be that these were ships that were probably going to be allowed to transit anyway. So it's not like it's a goodwill gesture. It just looks good in the press.
Last one we put out was the 27th. Um, that was Friday. Um, 7 boats, 7 vessels across the Straits of Hormuz. You're seeing some now. Pakistan are going to. Well, look again. What do we keep your eye on? It's this week. I think it's going to be about talks that are coming out of Pakistan, and if the Straits of Hormuz can open, what the Qataris do. We heard some rumours there. Have they got right of passage? I just think it's all eyes on Pakistan, and to be honest, keep another one on what is happening in Russia.
Yeah, and I think if you had a third eye, you got to watch what's going on with the U.S. and their military buildup. They're bringing in more rapid response troops, which have arrived already in region, and we could see a continuation like we've seen with other negotiations, where a lot of talk, and then there's some kinetic action that goes against where the talks were going.
Yeah,
So we could be for another roller coaster week when it comes to pricing.
absolutely. But I
So
hope everyone stays safe and all of that. And it's Easter coming up this week, so
yep. Click like, comment, and subscribe, and stay safe.
yeah.
And we will catch you all on the flip side.
Ciao.